Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Hope you're having a great day. Today, I wanted to come on and talk about the F word in divorce. Now, get your mind out of the gutter. I'm not talking about that F word, but I'm talking about the financials, maybe more scary of an F word for some people. You know what? As we approach divorce, we often think to ourselves, what's about to happen? Am I going to be broke? Is all my money going to be gone? Maybe I have an ex or soon to be ex-spouse that's bullying me into thinking that they're going to take everything. And it's a lot of fear mongering that happens, a lot of back and forth, and that doesn't need to happen. You know, I'm always going to say knowledge is power. The more you know, the more powerful you're going to be in your negotiations. Now, whether you're going through court, which I hope you're not going to do, or you're going with a mediator, you need to know all of the information that's important to know going into those negotiations so that you can negotiate with power. Don't let the other person make you think that you're going to lose everything, because that's not how it works. So let's talk a bit about, first of all, why would you hire a mediator that has financial expertise? Well, that's a huge benefit, because you can imagine if you're talking through negotiations and you're talking about if there's an equalization payment, like if somebody owes somebody else some kind of payment, what are my options for making that payment to the other spouse that aren't going to bankrupt me? What if I don't have the cash to actually pay that money to them? How else can I affect that transfer of value in a way that makes sense for me, but also makes sense for them? Who can talk you through that process better than a financial expert? They have ideas on which items can be transferred. They know what the process is to transfer them. So for example, maybe you have decided and agreed to transfer a portion of a pension. Well, how do you do that? There are forms that need to be completed. You can't miss certain details, or you're going to have a real problem on your hands with respect to, is the transfer legitimate? Plus there's tax consequences. So, you know, it's a great thing to have a financial person that's walking you through all of that, the discussion, to make sure that you know what the options are, you know what the tax consequences are, and you know what the flexibility is in certain items. You know, if you can't afford to make a payment through cash, you can talk through that with a financial professional. What does that mean for my day-to-day? Is that really going to make things hard for me to live day-to-day? Or am I better off transferring something else of value that will make my spouse satisfied that they've gotten the value they're entitled to? And what are we talking about with this whole equalization and value thing? Essentially, what happens is each person has to identify what all of their assets are and all of their liabilities are. So in terms of assets, we're talking about bank accounts, we're talking about the house, RRSPs, pension. Anything that you have of value gets listed on a form, and I'm going to walk through that form with you as well. Then you have to identify your liabilities. So do you owe some taxes? You know, it's tax time now. Do you owe money to the CRA? Do you have a mortgage? Do you have a loan, credit card debt? All of these items get listed on your financial statements, and you come out to a net value. So my assets minus my liabilities equals my net worth. So if we take an example, let's pretend that the wife has $100,000 in assets and she has $25,000 in debt. Her net value is $75,000. Then if we do the same calculation for the husband, let's pretend his value is $75,000 of assets and his debt is $25,000, and so he ends up with $50,000 of a net value. So the wife ends up with $75,000, the husband has $50,000. The equalization payment is essentially, in family law, trying to make both parties equal at the end of the day when you divorce. So instead of the wife being worth $75,000 and the husband worth $50,000, they should each be worth half, which is $62,500. So how do we affect that transfer of value? Basically, the wife has to, she's $25,000 of higher value. Half of that value needs to go to the husband. So the beauty of mediation is you can decide how to do that. So whereas if you go to court and you go to a judge, you don't have any control over what the judge tells you in terms of how the wife's going to make that equalization payment. if the judge says it's a cash payment or a lump sum or something, the wife is stuck making that payment however the judge told her to do it. In mediation, the two of you can decide together what makes the most sense. If the wife doesn't have liquidity or doesn't have enough cash to be able to pay that in that moment, maybe the two of you can agree on a transfer of RRSP. So the wife is transferring $12,500 to the husband from her RRSP, but not actually touching her cash in her bank account. The husband's satisfied because he got the value he's entitled to. The wife's happy as she can be, because she's not emptying her bank account. And that RRSP, eventually what was left over, will still continue to grow, will still have compounding interest, and she'll be able to put in more cash as you go along after the divorce. But ultimately, the value that the husband was entitled to was transferred to him, and both parties are satisfied because we met both of their interests. She didn't want to empty her bank account, and he just wanted to make sure that he got the value that he's entitled to. Sometimes there's a misconception that we share equally in terms of you get half the car, or you get half the house, or you get half of the RSPs. That's not actually the way it happens. It's determining what is each party's net value or net worth, and then transferring half of the excess value to the person who has less to make sure the ultimate value for each individual is equal. So it's a kind of semantics, but that's how it works. So in terms of the forms, and again, why it's really helpful to have a financial professional walking you through this, is you have to complete these forms for family law purposes, whether you speak with a lawyer or whether you go to a mediator. Either way, you have to do them. And that can be a really daunting task. If that's not really what you're wired to do, it can be kind of scary, it can be tedious, and it can be confusing. So why not go to somebody who knows what they're doing and can actually help you through and fill out those forms either for you or with you. And so you have assurance that you're not missing something, and you're happy that you've got a person that's got an expertise in this area and can walk you through and talk through what this actually means in English. What's happening with my finances? What does this mean for my day-to-day? How am I going to live? That person can actually help you think through maybe a new budget. You know, if you're starting from scratch, how do I get to this new budget and get myself where I want to be? So there's this form, I don't know if we can see it, it's kind of bright so you can't see it, but it's called the 13.1 financial statement. So you can download this for free from the Ministry of the Attorney General's website. And that's one of the first forms that a family lawyer is going to ask you to fill out. And I'll just walk you through some of the things that are in it so you have an idea. So the first part asks you about your income. So you're talking about, you know, what do you make? Are you a T4 employee? Do you have a T4 slip that you get from your company? Or are you self-employed? You need to be able to show what your income is, and you need to prove it. So whether that's a T4 slip, or if you're self-employed, your financial statements, you need to be able to prove what your actual income is. You can't just, it's not enough to just write on here what the numbers are. You need to have documentation behind that supports the numbers that you use. So then we talk about expenses. So, you know, do you pay union dues? Do you have rent or a mortgage? School activities that you pay for the children, clothing, entertainment. Essentially what they're getting at is, show me your budget. What does your budget look like? And the idea here is full and frank disclosure for both the husband and the wife. You each have to fill out this form. And the idea, again, is to see what is your financial position. And this information comes into play a little bit down the line when they're calculating support numbers, particularly for spousal support. One of the factors is called conditions, needs, and means. What does that mean? It means how able are you actually to pay this support number. So this information helps them with that and a few other issues to see what is your actual position. Then we get into assets. So you have to list your property, the matrimonial home, which is the home that you live in together. Is there a cottage? What other assets do you have? So is there some other land that you own? Vehicles, jewelry, property? All of this information has to be listed on this 13.1 financial statement. And again, you need documentation that supports the numbers that you're putting on those documents. And there's two dates that are important. One is the date of marriage. So on the day that you got married, what did you own? And this comes into play a little bit later, which I will talk about later in terms of the equalization. So again, you need documentation from way back when you got married to support any values that you want to use, because anything that you owned prior to the marriage, you actually get to exclude from the equalization calculation, meaning it's a benefit to you. That doesn't come into play when they determine your total asset value or your net worth. So if you don't have documentation to support the value that you say that you had prior to the marriage, you're probably going to be out of luck in terms of excluding that from these calculations. So do your best. Banks will keep information anywhere from 7 to 10 years. 7 is the legal requirement. Some of them will keep it even longer. So, you know, if you're in the beginning of the process, I would suggest to you go to the bank right now and see if you can request any of that information. Like as an example, if you owned any bank accounts or RRSPs that you held with a bank prior to the marriage, those are items you can exclude from this equalization if you can get the supporting documentation to prove it. So then there are other household items such as furniture, boats, cars, and again, you're talking about value at the date of marriage. And then there's valuation date. What is the valuation date? That's actually your date of separation. So it's really important that the two of you agree on what the date of separation is, because it does you no good if you know, dad or husband thinks date of separation is October 1st and mom says no it isn't, it's October 31st. If you're filling out this financial statement form, you can't be comparing apples to oranges. You have to have the valuation date as the same date. And that valuation date is also used if somebody has a pension and they have to get it valued. You need to be able to tell the people that are valuing your pension what the date of separation is so that they can use that in factoring in the calculation. So really important for you to agree on what that date is. And if you can't agree on that date, that's also a topic you can discuss in mediation, and you can have a conversation over what the right date should be. So then they talk about bank accounts and securities and pensions. So again, you have to list out all of the bank accounts that you had prior to the marriage, during the marriage, at date of separation, any RRSPs that you held. And then they talk about life and disability insurance. You need to list that out. So you'll usually have like a little booklet or something that comes from your insurance company that talks about the value of the insurance, who the beneficiaries are, and if there's a face value or not. You can get all of that information from the insurance company, and then you would keep that along with this financial statement that you're completing. And then there's a section called business interests. So do either of you own a business? This area can get a little tricky. This is why you want a financial professional involved. So if it's a small business and it's not worth that much, that's a discussion you should have in terms of how much information do I need to accept what the other person is saying is the value of that business. If you're talking about a business that's worth, say, $10,000 or $20,000, ultimately, we are each obligated by law to provide full and frank disclosure, and we need to provide evidence as to what the values are that we are claiming. So if I own a business, I'm obligated to show my spouse what the value is. If my spouse is not satisfied, maybe I have financial statements that I prepare myself, or I have a bookkeeper and they prepare these statements, but the spouse is saying, I don't buy it. I think that your business is worth way more. You might actually be obligated to go get your business valued by a financial professional. In that case, is usually a chartered business valuator. That can be very expensive. So if the business is worth something like $20,000 and you end up spending $20,000 or $30,000 on the CBV to get your business valued, was it worth it? Probably not. So these are things you want to think about, and it's really great in the situation of a mediation because that mediator can help you think through the pros and cons of what needs to have an official valuation versus, you know, if we're talking about small numbers, it might not be worthwhile. Maybe the two of you can agree on what that true value is. So then there's a section called money owed to you. So are you getting a tax refund? That's money owed to you. Does somebody else owe you something? Maybe you lent them money. Maybe there's something else that you're owed. It has to go in this financial statement. Then there's a section for other property. So maybe there's stocks and bonds. Maybe there's other land. Maybe there's some other kind of property that you own. It has to go on this financial statement. And again, you need to have supporting documentation that supports the value that you're saying this property is worth. Then there's a section called debts and other liabilities. So again, what do you owe? You know, do you owe somebody money? Do you have an HST liability? Let's say you have a business and you owe HST. That goes on the financial statement. Do you have in your personal taxes? Do you owe taxes? Again, it's tax time right now. If you were completing this financial statement now, you would want to incorporate that value of what you owe to the government under liabilities that you owe to other people. So you complete this financial statement. Then the last section is called excluded property. What is that? So basically any gifts or inheritances you can put in this excluded property section. As well, anything that you owned prior to the marriage goes in the excluded property section. The one caveat is the matrimonial home. So the home that the two of you lived in has separate rules. Whereas if you owned some other kind of property prior to the marriage and you can provide evidence to its value, that could be excluded. And why would you want to exclude items? Because when we talked about the asset value, so if the wife owned $100,000, but maybe she had bank accounts of $10,000 prior to the marriage and she was able to provide evidence of that, her value now becomes $100,000 minus the $10,000 that she had prior to the marriage. So now her net value is actually $90,000. Sorry, her asset value is $90,000 before deducting. In this example, we deducted $25,000 as her liabilities. So 90 minus the 25 is less than the 100 minus the 25, which means ultimately her equalization payment to her husband is less. So anything that you can provide in terms of evidence for items that you owned prior to the marriage is actually going to be in your favor when you come out to this equalization calculation. Similarly, oh, this lighting is terrible, sorry. Similarly, if you had debt prior to the marriage, maybe there was an OSAP debt, that actually will go against you because that has to be added back on your value when you're determining the equalization payment. So there's a lot of information that goes into completing this financial statement, and it can be really daunting and a really tedious task. Why not get a financial professional to help you do that? One is they're going to do it a lot faster than you are if you're not wired to do that kind of thing. You can just save yourself the aggravation and the stress by getting them to do it for you, and you have an assurance that they're going to do it properly. They know what they're doing. They're going to complete this financial statement. They'll take the tedium out of your life, and all you have to worry about is the rest of the divorce and the discussions, but leave the tedious details to them or somebody like me who can take care of it for you and let you think about the bigger items that are going on in the divorce. So that's the financial statement. Once you complete that, there's a form called a 13C, which is basically a comparison of net family property statements. So the thing that we just talked about, now you have this other form that's got 4 columns. So it's got what the husband says the husband owns, and what the husband says the wife owns, and then you've got what the wife says the husband owns and what the wife says she owns, and then we compare them. So where is there a discrepancy between what you say you own or your net worth is versus what the husband or wife says you own or your net worth is? And then we have a discussion. Why is there a discrepancy? How can we bridge the gap between the two different values? And these are really great discussions to have in a mediation where it's a positive, constructive environment. We're not battling each other in mediation. We're talking positively, with respect and with dignity, and we're talking through the issues. What does each person need to be satisfied of the value you're each using? And how can we bridge any gaps with discrepancies so that we can resolve quickly and not have to go to court? So those are some of the financial things that you should think about, and also some of the considerations you should think about in terms of what kind of professional do you want as your family mediator. You want to first make sure that the mediator is accredited with a professional organization. You want to know that they know what they're doing and they're properly trained. But then what other credentials might that mediator have, and what makes sense in your particular mediation? If you have a lot of assets and liabilities and you have questions and issues regarding your finances, really fantastic to talk to a financial professional. And the other thing is that financial professional can guide you. So maybe you actually need to talk to a financial advisor moving forward, because you need to start over, or maybe there's a house buyout. Maybe you're going to come into a bunch of funds in terms of selling the home, and you want to know what to do with that money. Great to talk to a financial professional. And someone like myself can certainly recommend you to a financial planner because I have them on my team. So that's it for today. You can see that there's a lot of complexity when you're talking about the finances and divorce, and you really want to talk to someone that knows what they're doing so that they can steer you in the right direction, give you good advice, and empower you with the knowledge that you need to make good decisions and to bargain and negotiate with power. Don't negotiate in a place where you don't know what you're entitled to. Always seek the help that you need, look for the resources you need, and don't be afraid to ask for help. You're never alone, and these days you can Google. There's so much out there to help you. There's so many support groups, there's professionals, there's all kinds of help out there. Don't ever think that you're alone. Have a great day, and we'll see you again soon.